Hi, I'm Rachel. This is actually a second take because something went wrong with the thing with the camera recording, which is kind of annoying on my behalf because these aren't supposed to be planned at all, meaning I'm having to kind of repeat myself, which means it will be different, but like also. Anyway, half the problem is kind of like I'm that's awkward. Half the problem. It, yeah, problem is what was I talking about? Alright, Stranger Things. Basically, I watched Stranger Things 4 recently, and specifically the episode. Nina Project? During the Nina Project, I think it was episode 5. Um, basically, there's this speech in the town hall. Basically, there will be spoilers for Stranger Things, where the leader of the basketball team makes this huge rowdy speech. Basically, and he uses Romans. Is this 4 to 5? I think. I don't know. 4, 4 verse 5. Chapter 4 verse 5, I think, or something. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's basically all about how we can't let evil overcome us, and we must band together and overcome evil with good works. We shouldn't retaliate in evil or whatever. And sure, it has very provocative language. It's very aggressive language, but the way in which he was using it as provocative and aggressive language was to rouse a mob, whereas it's supposed to be aggressive because it's like, you need to be kind to people, which is actually a weirdly aggressive thing to say, because it's like, you need to be kind to people. That's actually a surprisingly not normal thing, and something that people need to be reminded of a lot more. And it's like, you need to be good in the face of evil, and basically that whole thing of him, what he was saying was the opposite of that. It's like, oh, Eddie's murdering, he's not. He's absolutely not. And honestly, there are a lot of evidence pointing to the fact that he didn't, because even especially since the moment you introduce the supernatural, it's like, oh, it literally stops making any sense whatsoever that Eddie killed him. Before then, it's like, it makes no sense, but like, also, be supernatural, but supernatural doesn't exist. It has to be him. Like, who else? But like, the moment you start introducing supernatural, he's instantly off the dartboard. He can't be the killer. Like, no. But they're saying he is, and they're kind of going in boogie hunt. It's like, and thing, and they accuse the rest of the Hellfire Club. Anyway, but like, he's quoting the Bible verse, and he's like getting them riled up. It's like, we're good Christians, and we're gonna go beat up a bunch of teenagers. Most of which, the ones we are going to be targeting, we're seniors in high school, and they're sophomores, juniors. I don't know. It's their first year of high school. You're gonna be beating up those guys. And it's like, yeah, sure, some of them Hellfire clubs, but it's like, oh, you're beating up those ones. They have nothing to do with this. Eddie, at this point, has anything to do with it. What he has to do with it, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They basically they found him in hiding, got his point of view, and was like, yep, we have confirmed this is upside down shit. And then they went off and tried to solve the upside down shit and just basically left him alone for the next 2 days. So he actually doesn't know much of what's going on either. And they're like, Eddie's the leader, and it's like, Eddie doesn't even know what's going on. Like, Steve Harrington and Robbie, who are not part of the Hellfire Club, and not even part of necessarily even but they're definitely part of the party, or like the group in Hawkins who deal with the supernatural. It's like, oh yeah, because it's a supernatural deal. People who deal with the supernatural. It's like, oh, you're assuming because it's like, oh, Lucas and Claire. It's like, yeah. It's like, oh, he betrayed us. And I was like, nah, he was just to hang out with his friends that he normally beats up shit with and like save stuff. And it's like, but it's kind of like, oh, you're rallying against a literal bunch of teenagers. Like, you are literally, like, the people you are targeting are the youngest of the group. And you think that's okay? Like, it's kind of insane. Especially when it gets to the whole thing, D&D is the work of the devil. I was actually thinking about this. And I realized D&D is literally a more Christian and wholesome Christian game than most of the games we play at youth group. Because guess what? Games you play at youth group are very competitive. D&D is actually all about inclusivity. Not only about inclusivity, especially the way in which it's more generally accepted to play nowadays. Especially now, it's like, oh, no as long as toxic people exist and toxic characters exist. Exactly, but the whole word is toxic. If you're playing well and you're playing good and everyone's having a nice time, like the other games are competitive by nature, meaning you're not toxic for actually trying to do what is PvP. That's the whole point of the game. Whereas in Dragons, doing PvP, it's kind of actually toxic. It's kind of like you make yourself the center of attention, being self-serving. That is, like, depending on how you as a person play it, it can be bad for the group. It sometimes can be played off as long as you yourself are not feeling that. It's like, oh, the character's doing this, and make sure it's done in such a way that it's very clear that the character's doing this and you disagree with what the character's doing. And also, when the others tell you to back off, you do kind of back off a bit and try and it's a hard line to it's hard, and even then it's a fine line and you have to be very well practiced at it and really good group of friends. But even then it's like, oh, you will actually fracture a group if you're being self-centered and self-serving. Like, that's toxic, that's bad. It's like even like dungeon masters or GMs or whatever, they're encouraged to incentivize keeping the group together because you know what, from a story perspective and how you're running the world, it's easier if the group's together. So you want to keep the group together, meaning you're going to incentivize them to keep the group together. So that's teamwork, and sharing responsibility, cooperation. That's all good things. Being generally kind to one another, and even if it's just within your group, that's actually a lot better than a lot of the other games out there. More than that, especially in the 80s and 90s, they had a very strict, good, evil spectrum, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, well, as long as you're playing a good character well, it's like, if you're playing an evil character, the evil character's being self-serving, that'll actually spark to the party, meaning you won't actually get that. You won't get good party dynamics if people are evil, but you will get good dynamics if people are good. And, I get that also good and evil have magic components, and then stuff doesn't necessarily work that way, and whatever. People can act in loyalty and kindness and still technically be evil on the scale due to widely different reasons. That's just actually showing that the scale fails. But it's kind of like, oh, parties incentivized, but it's also parties are incentivized to be balanced, meaning it encourages diversity, not only amongst classes, but races. Like, in early D&D, that was more of a problem, but it's gotten better over time. But even then, it's like, you're encouraging people of different desperate groups to get together and work together. And you have to embody that character. It's like you're embodying someone else. You are trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And doing so makes you more empathetic. If you can put yourself in someone else's shoes, you are more empathetic to that person. And it makes it easier to be a better Christian if you can do that, because it's easier to feel love for them. It's like, oh, why are they doing this and this? Well, it's because of these reasons. And it makes it easier. Once you can explain someone's actions to yourself, it's easier to forgive them or whatever, or even love them, or take care of them, or know what they need. And D&D is actually really good at teaching you this, meaning Honestly, D&D, best Christian game out there. Don't think it was intended to be that, but I'm pretty sure it is. So it's kind of like, D&D is the devil. And it's like anyone else who, like, I get that's not a modern thing, but part of me was like, like, D&D is like the opposite of devil summoning. It's like actually good Christian wholesome fun. Which I was just like, part of me wants to just enter that city hall and just basically rip into everyone there. Just go, there, this is why you're wrong. And also basically then rip into the cops and basically like also like kind of maybe using some of the meta knowledge. Like using some meta knowledge, but also but only meta knowledge in the fact that if we want to acknowledge supernatural exists, let's talk about the fact that the FBI was totally like the FBI totally would have been called in for like a serial killer case of this gruesome proportions because like by this stage probably people have actually gotten a glimpse of what the bodies look like and they're really gruesome. It's like this is a really bad serial killing. You normally call the FBI. It's like, why aren't the FBI investigating? Like, you've almost certainly called them in, but by this point, like, you have to have done so. It's like, why aren't they investigating with you? That implies higher levels of supernatural shit going on, and they're not sharing it with you. And it's like, it's kind of like, why do you think it's Eddie? Because like, is the FBI investigating it? Because like, you would expect them to be investigating. It's like, who's their suspect, and why do they think it's suspect? Like, do you know their suspects? And it's like, or did they take one look at the photos and then basically block you out and you're making guessing games and you don't actually know who an actual suspect looks like. And you're just making assumptions. I'd kind of like to also just say that because honestly that's what they're doing in the show. And now I'm rewatching season 1. That's like, because I was like, part of me was like, but I was out, but you kind of not believe it. It's like, I went back and watching Hopper. It's like, Hopper's not necessarily believing, but he's also doing it in a different way. It's like less like, I'm getting I'm getting a witness statement saying that someone was lifted 5 feet in the air out of the water. How did that happen? And more like, are you sure that was Will's voice you heard on the phone? Because those two things are kind of different. It's like, Hopper actually was open to the idea of the supernatural being existed. Like, he wasn't just trustworthy because he's part of the group. He was trustworthy because he's a good cop. Way better than the ones that are handling it now. And it's like, we really need Hopper back. It's not just for the fact that he's competent. And it's like, it's kind of weird because you're introduced to him not being competent. But, like, the moment shit hits the fan, which is, like, the moment he's like, Joyce is like, my son is missing. He's like, fine, I'll take it seriously. And the moment he very quickly, and the moment he heads in the shed and he puts things together and he's like, okay, this is actually a problem. And immediately starts actually taking it seriously and going through the right steps and doing this. And he's like, yep, your son is definitely missing and it's definitely a big concern. And it's kind of that weird, it's nice flip where it's like, there are murders happening. That's actually cause for concern. And it feels less like the police aren't doing as much. And it's like, yeah, sure, we're not getting position of the police because we're not the characters. But it also feels like the police don't know what they're doing or how to go about doing it. And it's like, sure, they're knowledgeable about the supernatural, but they don't even pursue. They see something which is a body that is clearly at unnatural angles. Clearly unnatural. And they're just like, at a time in which, and even then, you literally got one suspect. And I get not announcing it straight away, but they couldn't even comparably find him, okay? Like, seriously, the kids found him quicker. And then you didn't even chase up on those leads, and it's like it took other kids to literally even close to finding fucking Eddie. Like, what the heck were the cops doing in that? They were incompetent. They were just incompetent. Like, in season 4, the cops were incompetent, and part of me, like, enjoys it because it's like, oh yes, the kids are running around them, but also like running loops around them, but also at the same time it's like the kids are running loops around them. Yeah, the kids should be fairly competent at the sneaking around stuff by now. They've been doing it for the past 3 seasons. But also, it, it should not be that easy. Like at all. Like, you gave them a chance to get their story straight in front of you where they were talking together and they were kind of contradicting each other as they were talking. You take them apart and it's like, you. Anyway, why am I talking about this now? It's supposed to be about God and stuff and Christianity. But, incompetence is annoying. It's like, just do your job well. Like, honestly, do your job well. If you have a job, take it seriously. I don't care if you don't like it. Take it seriously while you're there. And do a good job. Because no matter what you're doing, it will make someone else's day easier. That's all we can do. Or maybe it'll even make your day easier if you're actually, I don't know, taking your job seriously. You won't get it, like, they're like, oh, we're floundering and people are mad at us for not doing our jobs. It's like, yeah, well, you're also not doing your jobs that well. At all. Like, seriously. Even the other gang of teenagers was closer to finding you guys. Well, they actually did find Eddie before you guys, but like, they were closer to. But even then, like, they had a few false leads planted. They had a few false leads, and it's like, you were just generally incompetent. Like, I don't know what you were doing. I honestly don't know what you were doing for those 2 days. Because the team got so much shit done. Sure, they did end up forgetting about Eddie, but like, they got a lot done. Didn't do anything. Like, again, I don't want Eddie to be arrested because I know he objectively didn't kill a guy, but it's like, you should have made more of an effort to arrest the guy, or at very least bring him into questioning. And that's not even including the fact that you literally let one of your people know. It's like, oh yeah, we think Eddie kind of did it. And now he's on a righteous rampage. And yeah, it's just. Season 4 is a lot. And I'm just mostly mad at the girls for being incompetent. Also, it's kind of weird, like, the whole L thing in California, where she hits her with the roller skates. It's like, everyone's like, oh yes, badass bitch. And it's like, yes, badass bitch, but also at the same time, that was a wildly aggressive and overreaction to what happened. Like that was unnecessary reaction proportions, but also at the same time completely normal. Like, yes, you expect them to react in such a way. Like, that would actually be a normal response. And it's like Mike going, oh, I'm kind of scared that you did that. And it's like, you shouldn't be scared that she did that. You've been dealing with monsters for a while. Like, that's how you deal with threats. She's a threat. That's how you deal with them. Like, yeah, anyway. I was kind of like, oh, that was going a bit too far. But also, the police there were also incompetent. It's just like, you don't seem to be guilty. I'm like, her face is filled with guilt. She's literally not talking to you guys and basically fully shut down. That's actually normally some signs of guilt. It's like, you know what I hate? I think I hate the most about it is like just 80s psychology, just in general. It's like, oh, this, and it's like, that's not. And I suppose like school shrinks are just terrible in I don't even know what I'm saying. School therapists are just terrible in general normally. Just like, I felt like that was just no, don't do therapy like that. That's bad therapy. It's like, oh, reading people, you don't know how to read people. It's like, the only competent people in the show are the people who are already involved. Most of them are already involved, and if they're not already involved, we're very quickly dragged in. I.e., like Erica, or Erica Sinclair, or Eddie Munson. Like, once he joined the show, he was competent enough that he actually, joined in with the big kids. Like, once he was filling in the situation, but like, anyone competent in the show seems to join the party. Like, you can even tell, like, the parents, and it's like, oh, they're not necessarily, like, only the competent parent is, and you're like, what? Joyce is a competent parent, especially at the start of season 1. It's like, scarily, yes. She's the one parent out there who, like, I don't want to say it, but also, like, the other parents are negligent. The other parents definitely don't freak out as much as they should. They don't see that kid for 2 days. Kids definitely not at the other friends' houses. Sure, the kid's younger sibling is covering for him, but also at the same time, how the hell did you get away with that? How the hell did they get away with any of it? It's 2 seasons. It's like 3 seasons. They're just running around. Joyce is the only one who notices anything's off. Like, they're just generally incompetent and unobservant. Most of them, and anyone who is observant and competent ends up in that shit, and they end up having to help save the world. It's like, yeah, that's good, but also like, oh my goodness. These people are unobservant and incompetent. Like, it's just kind of disappointing, I suppose that's what it is. It's disappointing. But it does make me like the main cast better. And it's kind of cool going back and I'm watching like the first season now. Because I could watch season 4 and I'm going to watch the first season and like introduce all the characters. I'm like, I know how you're going to develop. It's like I'm looking at Steve and I was like, you are still an idiot. But now you're a badass idiot. So like, And I haven't seen it be much of an asshole yet. So like, it's just like, oh, you're cool now. So I was like, he hasn't actually acted like, he kind of hangs out with iffy friends, but even the way he was with them, I was like, it was almost like he didn't like having those friends. Maybe that's just me reading too much into it, knowing what's going to happen later, but also at the same time, it's like, they were definitely into, like, being douchebags way more than he was, even in those first scenes, I think. I don't know. It could be me reading into this. Oh well. So, yeah, that's a video about, well, effectively Stranger Things. Rant on why that, and a brief mention of why the Bible quote is, the way in which they're quoting the Bible is wrong. Like, the quote's right, but the way in which they're applying it is completely and utterly false. Like, fighting evil does not mean fighting evil with a bat. It means being kind and nice and good. And, loving your enemies, like God says, or Jesus says, literally any other time. So, that's a wrap. And I don't know what that. Also, cool, I like this shirt. It says knits. Yeah, knit happens. Gotcha. Yeah, but it's really a jumper shirt. It's woolen. It's nice. It says knit happens. So shit happens. Mum didn't notice it first. I don't think I did either. Just why we bought it. I think I kind of noticed it though. And I was like, yes. Love a good pun. Because it's knitting knit. Anyway. Don't know why I talked about the shirt at the end. Okay, bye.